Now it should be happening. It's never done that before. Never done that before at all. Really strange. There's nothing on here. Oh, here I am. Adverts. Skip the adverts. Right, okay. So, I'll put my headphones on. Just bear with, everything went different again this time. And I don't know why. If I knew why, I'd get this sorted. You'd think after this amount of time I could get it right, but you know. All I can do is try. And that's all worked. Can't see the flipping volume. Well, that should be a reasonable volume. Why is the computer making noises? I don't understand that. Boo 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 boo. Anyway, well, according to this, I'm live, and hello, Stephen. Mini disc worth it. Local thrift store has a Sony mini disc for €50. Depends if you've got €50. I'd love to play with a mini disc. I'll take my headphones off now. I do apologise for the frog in the throat, because that's one of the reasons I didn't go live last week, because trying to actually speak for more than a few seconds, and what happens is it goes all croaky. So I can do a little bit of a burst to, well, sort of a croaky burst to do a voiceover, but not actually able to do anything else. Hello Andrew, how are you doing? Good. It's good to know. I really wish this software wouldn't change. This time I had to click the Go Live with it. Go Live, not Glow Live. Go Live within the YouTube Studio. Previously, the software, what's it called? OBS. Previously, the OBS used to do all that sort of thing. So I don't understand what's happening. Because every time I think I've got it sussed, it changes. It's just one of those things. But yeah, hey ho. Right, how's everybody doing? Are they all right? We got. Sorry about last week and the week before, but well, the week before we had the problem with the. I tempted to say Wi-Fi, but it's not Wi-Fi because it's Ethernet. Which is why I was really surprised that we had a problem, because they say everything. Oh, it's doing it again. It says the stream's current bit rate is 1726.28 kilobit puts. Is lower than recommended. We recommend that you use a stream. What's it saying there? You use a stream bit rate of 6800 kilobits. So does that mean I'm too big or too small? I don't know. All in the stream current bit rate is lower than the. No, it says it's lower because I've got all these. Look at this. Look, this is really quite frustrating, because this is the problem. I know you guys think I'm just daft sometimes, but this is what I've got coming up on my dashboard, and it's telling me that things are going wrong. But then it says stream status is good. So why? It makes no sense to me. But obviously the last time I was on, it all started stuttering, so then I had to cut it off. But we did have a problem with our router went down, and then when I contacted Utility Warehouse, they said, oh yes, and there's also an OpenReach network problem. but it'd just be nice if it actually worked. Now I've got that, I can screenshot that. Anyway, let's go back to a picture of the pretty one. Oh no, can't do that, just have to go back to me then, like that, and fade. Whee, right, okay, anybody Andrew says he loves mini disc, still have a Sony QS deck and a working R55 MD Walkman. All right. And yeah, I never actually got to play with mini discs, so I would love to have a play with a mini disc on a, sort of, I haven't played with one basis. And but €50 roughly translates to 50 quid. It's quite a lot of money, but then they were hugely expensive when they were new. Absolutely enormously expensive when they were new, which is one of the reasons I never got one. I mean, up until now, I'd never seen. I've done a test on the metal tape. I bought some. In fact, they're so precious, they're still here. That's the box that they came in. Up until I got those, I'd never seen a metal tape. Obviously, previously I'd been playing with Type 2s a bit, but because I was a young man with a family, I was young once, long time ago, when I was getting into it, well, I was repairing the stuff, I was playing with the stuff, but couldn't afford more than the run-of-the-mill stuff, and to be honest, I couldn't afford anything better than Type 1 tapes. Stephen says picture and sound are good on this end. Good, that's great. And Andrew says Techman is a big fan of. Yes, have you seen how many mini disc players he's got? If he wasn't before he bought that pack, he's got to be now. He's got hundreds of them. Maybe I ought to ask you to send me one and I can have a play with it. I don't know. No, we're not on that sort of terms. I tried BASF metal tapes when a kid, but just one or two. See, I never had a machine that could take them. Well, there's a picture on one of my videos of what the stereo cassette deck I had originally was, and then I had a Dolby. You see, one of the troubles with being in at the beginning is you either get the really good stuff, or you get the really irritatingly sort of weird stuff. My first cassette deck was a top loader, which is okay, and there was no noise reduction on it, so I actually bought I don't know who did. It was a kit, Dolby noise reduction kit, and came in it was a nice silver sort of its time box, and you had to calibrate it, and it had tones and things, and you fed it into it and out of it, and it produced your Dolby tapes for you and reproduced them, and it was great. And then I got onto some better stuff later. But, I mean, I had some really good boom boxes and things, but as far as hi-fi cassette went, my brother went into it quite heavily, but I never had the ability to do so, because I went and got myself married, and when you get married, you have babies, and they cost more money than you can spend on cassettes and stuff. But we did have a very nice, sharp, upright stereo. And I did have a really good Rotel turntable, and I don't know what happened to that. It cost me 70 quid in 1976. Work that out, that's 700 quid nowadays at least. And I don't know where it went. Life is a whatnot. Yeah, so Andrew says, a friend of mine doing a house has just unearthed a box of unopened BASF chrome tapes. Oh, wow. House clearance, yeah, okay. So it's hit the jackpot there then. Yes, I would say so. If they haven't degraded, he's got himself some good kit there. As you know, I've done some BASF chrome testing on my W1200. Of course, that's the standard run-of-the-mill deck that most people might have something similar to, and they come out really good. They do come out very good. All this rubbish about them being difficult. Oh, that reminds me. If anybody ever tells you you've got to calibrate a tape down to a type 1 setting and whack the bias up, it means that the tape is degraded, and it's really not what you really want to be doing, because it means that the tape isn't working properly, because they were and should be IEC Type 2 specifications, which means they should work on a machine that's set up to IEC 2. Now, I know about fine-tuning, as you know, I've done a few videos on it, but when you've got to turn it down onto Type 1, because that means that tape is degraded, and whilst you might get a reasonable result out of it, you're never going to get the best that that tape ever could have been, because things are drifted. I mean, it's a bit like, when you buy a Mars bar, particularly if you go abroad, if you go somewhere like Spain or somewhere, and you go to the little shop down the road that supplies the local holiday makers, but it's the one that's tucked around the corner, and you go in there and you buy a Mars bar, and when you come out, you take the wrapper off and the chocolate's gone white. And so you think, well, hang on, that's not quite right. It tastes all right, but it's not as good as it should be. Well, if you buy a BASF tape and you have to calibrate it on Type 1 setting, then obviously if it's a Type 2 and you have to calibrate it on Type 1, you've got the Mars bar with the white fluff, and it's never going to be as good as the one without the white fluff. It's just a simile, and it's just an observation. Ferrochrome, what's wrong with ferrochrome, Andrew? Or are you talking about calibrate them on Type 1? Because they should be calibrated on Type 1, because that's what they were made for. I could be absolutely firm about that. I've read up on them. Ferrochrome were intended to be calibrated on Type 1, and the only difference between a ferrochrome setting and a Type 1 setting is the EQ, the 120 microseconds. Oh, look at that. Yes. Some duplicated tapes were designed to be recorded at 70 microseconds and played back at 120 microseconds. Yeah. Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? If you record a Type 2 tape with the Type 1 EQ, you can play it back beautifully on a Type 1 deck without having to worry, which means that you can sell the benefit of all the extended high frequencies, lower noise, etc. But you can play it back with correct EQ on a pocket Walkman or the normal because everybody forgets, because everybody's got, if they've got recent or high-end machines, they've all got CR02 on them, Chrome, Type 2, whatever you want to call it. But if you go back to 1963, 64, 65, before Chrome became a thing, most machines didn't have it. And then when they did have it, this is what I was saying about not having it before, they were expensive. So people like myself, we would buy a cassette deck, and we'd actually have a choice. Should we pay the extra, what was probably then a £5, which would be 50 quid nowadays, and get the one with the Chrome switch on it? Or should we stick to the one that the hi-fi Type 1 one? All those Chrome tapes are very, very expensive. We remember having conversations like this with people. Oh, they're so expensive. Are they worth it? Or is it just another one of these things that they're trying to sell you? If you switch the switch, does it really make it? One of the most common questions was, if I put a ferrous tape, a Type 1 tape in my cassette deck with the Type 2 switch, if I switch the switch, will it record it like a Type 2? And do you know what? A lot of people did it, and they were quite happy with it. And the reason they were happy with it was because if they didn't have any way of playing it back with any decent quality, they couldn't tell the difference between the good Type 1 recordings and the awful Type 2s, because it just all came out as a mush. But then if you've ever heard 1960s stroke 70s normal consumer equipment, you'd know that it was a lot of it was pretty rough. So when the Amstrads and things came along, they didn't have. People say, well, why did people buy that rubbish? Well, because the stuff they were replacing was even more rubbishy, which is it's just one of those things. But if you weren't around then, you can't understand that. So yeah, I've got a TIAC because now is this a good feature or a bad feature? I've got a TIAC 777, I think it is. I forget what the number is, but it's a fairly late, but it's not got auto tape select. It's got two buttons. It's got an EQ button and it's got a bias level button. And the actual labelling on it is really confusing because it shows you having one on and two on and two off and whatever, according to the different types of tapes you want to use. But essentially, it doesn't do metal, but it does chrome and type 1, and it's got the labels on it for ferrichrome. And so, how do you set it up? You switch these switches. But it's very. I mean, even I looked at it and I thought, what the hell is that on about? And yeah. So it's funny how when people look back, they don't see the same that we had when we were looking forward. I understand very few people had. And this is Stephen says. I understand very few people had true hi-fi equipment even back in the 80s and 90s. Define hi-fi. My dad, in fact I might even have a picture of it somewhere. In fact I have got a picture of it somewhere. My dad in 1965, 66 built a solid state amplifier using germanium transistors. He mounted it in a homemade wooden box, and he had a Garrard. We eventually got a Garrard SP25, but we started off with something less complicated than that. It was a standard BSR deck, turntable deck for it, and he bought or made a stereo receiver, FM stereo receiver, when FM stereo came out, and that was when that started being broadcast, and he plugged that in. Now he also built the two speakers. You can see where I got it from, can't you? He physically built the cabinets for the two speakers, which he bought from a company called RS, or as it was called in those days, Radio Spares. And they were full range speakers with they didn't have tweeters, but they had some sort of, they weren't ovals, they were round. They weren't particularly full range, but they were called full range speakers. And he had those, and he sat them on the thing, and people used to come around and listen to his stereo because they didn't know what stereo was, and he had to try and explain to them what stereo was, because in the UK in the 60s the majority of people didn't know what stereo was, and they didn't have any way of listening to it. This was when you'd go to Woolworths and you could buy a Russian Rigonda record player. It cost £23, I think it was, and it had two speakers which were basically not much better than open back car speakers, and a turntable and a very small amplifier in it, but it was cheaper than a Dancet. And if you've watched Recordology's channel, you'll know about Dancets because they're trying to revive the name. So yeah, what's it saying there now? Yeah, but ordinary stuff was pretty decent in the late 80s. Again, it's yes, no. I saw a very interesting thing. Now it was on YouTube, and it was about what stuff was happening. And well, let's take for instance, you're talking about the cost of a video recorder, for instance. They started off at about £1,000 at that time, and they dropped down to, eventually you could buy one for just over £100 before they stopped selling them. Now you say, well, that £100 one wasn't very good. Well, it wasn't, but the £1,000 one wasn't an awful lot better. It was possibly built more rigidly, but it wasn't a lot better. It didn't do as much as the £100 one, but it did it for longer and was more stable. But which one's better? The one that was 10 times more but only gave you the same sort of performance. You could buy 10 of the cheap ones. So if you wanted to get longevity, you could buy 10 of the cheap ones. So is it better? And if you're looking at picture quality, the picture quality on the £100 one would have probably been better than the £1,000 one, but not as good as the £500 one in between times. And that's where the problems come. We all know about the W1200 as being a reasonable priced cassette deck at 360 quid. It's now gone, last time I looked, it's 400 and something, which is probably down to Brexit, because I'm looking on the Amazon site and I don't know exactly where they're sourcing them from. But I know my turntable was affected by import duty. But if you're looking at the cost of I said my turntable I had when I was a kid, I was 17, 18. Yeah, about that. And so I spent a lot of my wages on buying a decent turntable, and that decent turntable cost me £75 in 1970 something. And if you multiply that up by the current inflation rate figures from the Bank of England, it works out at about 750 quid. So I had a very expensive turntable, but they were a lot more expensive at the time. And if you look at the original cassette decks, the original thing that Philips bought out, the mono one, the shoebox, that worked out at about 450 quid in today's money. So for the same money today that you would have spent in equivalents when the first mono shoebox came out, you could buy yourself a W1200 TIAC. So does that mean that the W1200 TIAC is expensive? Well, people today say it is, but then that's because what are they comparing it to? There's the Ion stroke, whatever it is, Marantz thing, about $120 or thereabouts, or the last time I looked it was. Not that we can get that over here, but that thing, which I've got the Ion equivalent of, was £100 and something pounds. Was that a lot of money? Well, work that back. That's a tenner in the days when Philips invented the thing. In fact, it's less than that. So, what is ordinary? People thought my dad was mad because he made a stereo system. They had their little dancets and they just played mono records. Well, they played stereo records in mono. And I can remember it's quite a big thing when my aunt got a dancet record player, which was stereo, and it had a clamp-on speaker that you had to buy as a separate thing, but it had the outputs on the back to be able to feed it to the mono, to the stereo, to the other mono speaker. And then you had to switch a switch to make it so that the main unit had one speaker, the left or the right, I forget which one it was, and the other speaker was then active. And that was a lot of money. But was it better than the stuff today? Well, when you consider how much an MP3 player costs, when I bought my first one, it cost a lot of money at the time. But now you can pick them up for, 10 quid? For a 5 gig thing? I don't know. It's ridiculous. So how much is a lot of money? This is the question that I keep on coming back to. And, this is the thing we're saying about, if you look at what a Torrens or a PS Audio, or it says ads inserted. I didn't see that before. Okay, if you could look at what a Torrens or one of those big, the hi-fi stuff. If you look in a proper hi-fi shop now, and you see what they're charging for stuff like the good decks. I mean, a 1200 Panasonic record deck thing is 1,500 quid. I mean, how can you justify 1,500 quid for a motor and a bearing and a tube with a needle stuck on it and a cartridge which costs 50 quid. I don't know. Steve says, Ordinary was an all-in-one MIDI-sized hi-fi system costing around €500. Not many people had significantly better. Yes, you're probably right there, Stephen. But that, you're right. A €500, 500 quid, a turntable mini system was actually quite good. But that's and then you'd then pay extra. On my shelf, on the back behind me, is a sound. That's a Behringer or Studio Master PA on my there, and we also know what that is. That sort of that thing. I mean, that's a 150 watt RMS monitor speaker studio, PA usage thing with a 3-channel mixer. 4-channel mixer in it. How much did that cost? Well, hardly anything in comparison. That's about 130 quid, I think. So, things have really, really come down. But yeah, Ordinary. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the really cheap Amstrads and stuff like that, they were not as rubbishy as the modern stuff is, but not far from it. And I don't know. It's just one of those things. People nowadays don't want to spend money. I mean, your average kid, young person, not so young person now. My son's 40, 41, 42. He's got surround sound and whatever, but it's taken him a while to go from kid with his car had a better stereo system in it than the cost of the car, but did it sound very good? No, it just was very loud. And now he's getting into sound and stuff, but he wouldn't dream of spending the sort of money that a decent hi-fi would cost, because with the digital you don't need to, of course. And I think that's part of the problem is that digital's so cheap. If you get an adequate CD player, it will way outperform any of the other sort of component stuff. Whereas my turntable, which is quite expensive, how does that compare it to the cassette deck? Well, it's about half the price, but people won't buy it. They won't buy expensive equipment unless they're really into hi-fi, and then they go all silly about it. I don't know. Anyway, what else we got on here? It says, Andrew says, some like the AOA or Sony all-in-one MIDI systems were pretty amazing and had some real innovative features. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andrew. And he says, I had separates in the late 80s, one was usually Denon. Yeah. I mean, Stephen says, we had a JVC. My friend had a Pioneer, but had an uncle with an all Kenwood separates, including 3-head tape deck. He was eccentric. Yeah, well, you see, your uncle had it right, didn't he? The biggest problem with a music centre, let's call them a music centre, is that they will always build them up or down to a price. And so when you've got your Kenwood or your Pioneer, I mean, by definition they're going to sound good because that's what they're going to do, but they're always going to let you down on something. So maybe the tuner wouldn't be as good as it could be, or maybe it'd have a wonderful tuner, but the cassette deck would be a little bit troublesome, or would be not quite as good as it could be. I mean, obviously the most obvious thing was you couldn't upgrade without going loose. But I always made sure that if I had anything to do with anything, it always had an auxiliary input, or as I've heard it pronounced a lot on YouTube, aux. You've got to have an aux input, which is, it's fine. but it's not really the best way to go, except for the fact that sometimes, you know, they make themselves so good they don't know how good they are. Speakers were always a letdown. This is why when we had the vertical play sharp, record player was superb. The ability to program it was really good. Radio was adequate. Radio was adequate. Cassette was good. Sound quality from the speakers was fantastic, but, you know, unfortunately, the speakers rotted. The rubber surrounds to the actual speaker rotted. It was the nicest sounding system I'd ever heard at that time when we got that. I bought it as a present for my former wife, and yeah, it was great. She loved it because it meant that she didn't. Of course, this is why my turntable went missing, I think. She was scared of using it because it was a proper thing. But using the sharp, she could just drop the record in, push the button, and it did it all. It was magic. And it sounded good. Absolutely. Well, yeah, my dad's first stereo system was a homebrew and a Heath kit. Literally a Heath kit. That was the tuner he built. But yeah, strange. According to this, we're still running at a really bad bit rate, but I'll keep going. Right. Any got anything now? Stephen, did you notice I did answer your thing about was the was the UFO any good or better than the output of the turntable? I haven't actually played with my turntable enough to do that yet, but it was interesting about the fact that they don't run off the power. Andrew says, I remember even as a kid my dad plugging the earphone output of the old CRT TV into the aux input of the stereo. Yes. Excuse me, I've got to have a cough. Yeah, sorry. We actually built, talking about that sort of thing, Andrew, we built Practical Wireless had a thing where you got a tuner and you did something to one of the coils or something, and then you fed the audio output to so you could feed it to stereo. You got line level from it, and they also used to sell NICAM decoders as well, which was good fun. But I used a hi-fi video recorder for that. But yeah, did you know? Well, there's a thought. If you go back, you know why you couldn't plug? Anybody know why you couldn't plug into a normal TV to your stereo system just by sort of like, you know, connecting to the speaker cables? Anybody got any idea on that? I will leave you with that thought while I go off, and I think Andrew might know, but I'll go off and just get a quick drink. Hang on, bear with. Ouch. Trouble with this cold I've had, it makes everything ache, which is not so good. Oh look, there I am. I'm sitting myself down now. I'm seeing the delay between one thing and another. That's weird. I'm normally watching this. I'm actually watching this on the because of that heart, which is there. Oh, I can send them. All right, okay. And hum sounds like an earthing problem, perhaps. Not quite. there would be a hum, and on a normal UK TV from the sort of 60s and 70s, yeah, I'm just trying to think, up to about 90, well, up until they started having SCART sockets on them. If you just sort of, it didn't necessarily have a headphone outlet, they would have had an interesting hum, probably followed by smoke and the smell of charred flesh. The reason being, they would have had a live or a half-live chassis, and no, subcarrier interference, not a problem. It would have literally just been the fact that they would have exploded into a puff of smoke. Because all TVs up until a certain point used to have live chassis. The portables, they normally had transformer outlets for the. They had isolation transformers to feed out the sound if they had headphones. Not many portables, if you think about it, in the early days, and I'm not talking about just Sony ones, but the original sort of like transportable TVs, they didn't have plug-in speakers. They didn't have anything silly like that. They literally sat there. And a little known fact is that the aerial sockets on TVs could occasionally go live. They actually had two capacitors, high voltage capacitors, one for the earth, so you have the earth inside of the aerial, and one for the signal. So you have two separate capacitors connecting the rear aerial socket, which is normally mounted on a plastic plate or a Bakelite plate or some sort of non-conductive plate, which then connected to the chassis of the TV via these two high voltage capacitors. And that is why you weren't allowed to go changing things on them. But the majority of lay people didn't know that. And that's why that was part of the reason why people used to get TV fires and things. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, don't take this as being a total, but if you had a breakdown of the aerial capacitors, then obviously you could get shorting to earth via the aerial lead, and that's where the problems sometimes came with TVs. So that's one of the reasons why people used to say unplug your TV, and they meant the aerial as well, because you could get some weird and wonderful things. So yeah, strange but true. That's why TV engineers have isolation transformers on their benches. They when I worked at basically Mastercare, but various other ones as well. It was a Mastercare subsidiary. The benches, and also worked for an independent. The mains came in, went to a big 500 VA or even 1000 VA transformer, and then that fed the bench. So all your outlets were on that, and then you'd have you wouldn't have anything with earth anywhere near the actual equipment or the thing, because the last thing you wanted to do was tie your isolation transformer to earth. But your test equipment, sometimes that was a bit. We used to have to be careful about that, because you could plug that into a different socket and you'd end up with an earth that you didn't really want. Because as soon as you earth one side, the other side becomes live in relation to it. Anybody worked out why there was a problem? Changing the subject totally. I'll bring it back or whatever. But did anybody notice the NTSC to PAL conversion problem that I had with the tape? And anybody managed to work out why it's a problem? And it wouldn't have been a problem if I'd been in America playing an American tape, or if I'd got an American machine, obviously, playing the American tape. Why was it a problem because it was a European machine? Anybody got? Andrew must know this one, seeing as it's partly in your field, I think, from what I remember. I could be wrong. I wonder if Eggle's going to come on today. Recordology's done a couple of lives recently. Some weird. He's really enjoying living in Florida. He keeps on going to Disneyland, and I'm very jealous. But that's another story. I don't actually want to live in Florida, but I wouldn't mind going to Disneyland. Right, you're not seeing the video yet. Right, okay. Well, I'll explain the problem then, Andrew. Got a Japanese tape, so therefore NTSC, and it's that's part of the problem. You've not seen the video either, then, Stephen. So right, the reason that PAL is 50 hertz and NTSC is 60 hertz is because of the mains, yes. But if I had an old proper video recorder playing NTSC, and I tried recording it on my computer with the capture device I'd got, it would work, because it would be 525 line, 60 hertz, and it would be NTSC. And if you take that as being the signal, that's fine. And if I was playing it on a PAL machine, it wouldn't work at all. And you'll see that on the video why that is. And if I was playing it on the machine I got, which is the one that we saw that all went up in smoke the other month, it happily plays the NTSC tape, but it puts it out as PAL 60. And the trouble with PAL 60 is it's not actually a standard. It's a contrive. What's the word? It's one of those things where it's a compromise. So because I've got an Japanese tape playing on a system that wants me to be able to watch it on a UK TV, the capture device doesn't regard it as being a proper signal. And the result of that is that you end up with the thing not working properly, and you have to get over that. And the way I got over it was, I won't do a spoiler, but it's worth you having a look. What I've got to do now, and I think Andrew might even know what it is. I'm going to try some different capture software to see if there's any that will actually take PAL 60 in, because PAL 60 is a pain in the backside. Beautiful black and white picture on the computer, but it's a colour tape that's being played. Anyway, I'll let you look at the video and you can work that one out. And what I'm going to do is, anybody interested in CCAM? Now, Stephen, is yours a PAL country or a CCAM country, or do you have multi-standard, I presume? If you're near the border, you probably pick up the French channels. Mind you, it's all digital now, so it's probably an old question. V-Record on Linux does, I think. All right, I'll have to hunt that one out, because I've got a few other tapes I need to be able to play with, and I've got Toy Story. Is it Toy Story? No, the one. All right, yeah. So yours is PAL region. I think only the French really went for CCAM, and French colonies. But because I've got some CCAM tapes, because we went over to France quite regularly in the old days, I bought them because we knew they would play on a PAL, but obviously they only play in black and white on PAL. My wife had some old VHS tapes that were CCAM from Poland. Oh yes, because of course that would have been the old Russian thing, because Russia used CCAM for some reason. I presume because it's not American. That's because there's the rivalry, like NTSC never twice the same colour, and then you got, I don't know what the P they take out of PAL. but it's phase alternate line is the real word. But then there's SECAM, which is something like system, especially something or other of not American. And so, yeah, I'd have to look that one up, but it's something along that lines. It was all. I mean, did you know, for instance, SECAM is actually a better method SECAM in the Middle East, Old French colony? Yeah, my machine does MESSECAM, but I've found it very hard to find out what the difference is between SECAM and MESSECAM, because you have to switch the switch on the machines to make it do whatever. Because it also gets confusing with PAL transmission, well, TV transmission standards. PAL, yeah, never the same colour. That's it. The SECAM one's the really vicious one. Of course, anybody in the know knows that PAL is actually a variation. Subcarrier frequency. Now, oh right, so subcarrier frequency is the difference between SECAM and MECAM. All right, that would make sense. But why? Is it still 65-25 or 50, should I say? Or is it like the equivalent of a PAL 60 type jobby? I say I never had to, because when I was working for the military people, it's different on the Middle East SECAM. There must be a reason for it. When I was working for SKC, we dealt with worldwide standards, but more of a problem was was getting this things to receive the different spaces. Yeah, that's it. All right, okay, that makes some sort of sense, because obviously when you're talking about broadcast standards as opposed to the video standards, I mean, PAL is PAL. If you're talking about proper 3.58 and whatever. If you're talking about broadcast standards, when you've got PAL I, PAL G, PAL BG, something else, but there is a PAL for, I think it's used in one of the Southern American countries, and I think it might even be Brazil, where they use effectively PAL 60, but it's not exactly the same. But it's effectively PAL 60, and that's always interesting, because with the PAL G, PAL BG, PAL I, that's all to do with the spacing of the audio carrier, and one of them is the width of the frequency response of the luminance, the width of the actual thing. So Andrew High PAL all set out in EU. EBU papers, yeah. PAL N in Brazil, that's the one, yeah. Which is weird. I mean, a little known fact: if you had a German video recorder and you wanted to play back on a UK telly, you could actually either buy yourself a new modulator, just slot it in on some of them, or on some of them you could actually just stick a screwdriver in the coils, and you could just retune the audio subcarrier down to the appropriate spacing, which was, I think, 6 megahertz instead of 5.5 megahertz. So you had to move it, half a megahertz, whatever, and it would work. But you were always, it depended on when you were doing that, depending on the receiver you were using, always a bit trouble. And obviously the reception one was fun. You had to get some of them you had to get crystals to get the thing in. I had one American family, they had a JVC, and that was a worldwide reception one. God, trying to get the parts for that, I ended up having to get bits from Germany to service an American JVC Japanese VCR, and Where did I get the parts from the TV? I think they were for France or something. Again, it was a hell of a job to do because they were very territorial. Although it was JVC and it was the same company, JVC, they all licensed to JVC Japan. They were very, that'd be very similar, Andrew. They're very hard. If it wasn't sold by that country, then they didn't want to know. And the worldwide ones, very few were sold by any of the countries. They were sold by presumably Japan. And parts were very hard to get and very expensive. And trying to get a manual for it, wow. And then trying to get anybody, you couldn't talk to anybody about it because they didn't know anything about it because it wasn't one of theirs. You actually were better off trying to talk to a JVC engineer about a Ferguson video recorder than you were trying to talk to him about a multi-standard worldwide thing. It's just the way of the world. Just the way of the world. Yeah, that's it. Gret import usually, yeah. Well, they bought this. They were being sold by the Grey import. Yeah, that's better. They were being sold by the whatever the American equivalent of the NAFI was. SSVC sold the stuff in the UK bases, not UK, but British military stuff. But the American equivalent were selling these worldwide things. They were lovely pieces of kit. Yeah, Tottenham Court Road dealers, they were always... Do you remember Tottenham Court Road? It was really, really good. You could go up there and spend hours just wandering around looking at all the different shops and everything they had and drooling over all the equipment. It was many an hour spent. Me and my dad used to like doing that. We used to go up there for, over many years. Went up there once and bought some videotapes for a Grundig Super VCR, and the tapes we bought were AGFAs. They were for the old, it's the Grundig version of the Philips 1500/1700. The 1700 played for 2 hours, and the Grundig SVCR played for 4 hours on a tape, but they charged by the hour. So if you bought an SVCR tape, they cost twice the price of a standard Philips tape. So we discovered which bit to cut out of the moulding, and we bought the AGFAs, but they were £28 to buy, and that was it again. So that was that was in the very late 60s. Very late. That was the very late 70s. So again, you're talking about 200 quid in equivalents for a tape. We actually bought, I think, 3 tapes, and we just had to keep recording over them. And the machine was really, really good and awful at the same time. It was really, really good because it had brilliant picture on it, really good sound. You couldn't tell the difference between it and the TV at the time. But once you'd run it for about 2.5, 3 hours, it would then start losing track, and you'd have to clean all the mechanism. It wasn't that the AGFA tapes were no good. It did it on the genuine Grundig ones as well. Notorious. The old 1700s weren't that better, but they were really good pictures. And VHS and Betamax were such a letdown in comparison. But I think reliability was one of the things, very much so. Right, okay. Anybody else would like to talk about? I'm just wondering, rabbiting on here. It's 9 o'clock, so. Stephen, anything to mention? I did also mention the 78R stylus and what you had to say about that. And yes, I agree with what you were saying on that. The not so much on the mono bit, because the thing about mono is it's Well, I was amazed with the stylus thing, how different the two signals were. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the ladies' records are knackered, but they are 70 odd years old, and some of them play better than others. But the difference the stylus made was absolutely amazing. So that was that thing. Did anybody see the thing, Tecmo's video at the weekend about the post office system and the fun he was having trying to get it out of America? Because he's done a reworking of the idea of the display thing they had in the post office, with the audio-visual display, and he was recounting the story of how he was trying to get the stuff to show everybody, and it wasn't. Not so much just been buying and playing more records. Yeah, I've got to sit down and play with play my turntable. But the problem I've had is that I've been trying to do that tape was one thing, and then do the video of the tape was another thing. I've put up a video today about a subwoofer. This was a question I was going to ask you guys. Got a sweet collection of sweet singles. Oh, sweet, as in, sweet. Yeah, I remember them. I can't remember the tune they did now. Ballroom Blitz. Is that one of them? Anybody got any idea how to demonstrate a subwoofer on YouTube? Because we've got this lovely subwoofer, and I've done a quick review of it. It really sounds good, but how do you get across a frequency response between 20 hertz and 120 hertz? So it's a wide range. It's a 100 hertz range. How do you demonstrate that? So I didn't. But what I thought I'd do is, in about 6 months' time, I'd actually do a proper, that's how we do it, that's what it's been used for thing, and it's been reliable. And that's when, you should hear the B. Oh, are they, the B-sides are better, are they? I was always keen on them, but I was a bit busy when they came out. I was young. I remember being young once upon a time. I used to be able to stand up without making noises, sound effects, and all that sort of thing. But, yeah. Okay. Anything, Andrew, anything to say? I don't know where Calvin is tonight. It's probably that time of the month, and so he'll probably catch up on the replay. If anybody's got anything, I know I keep asking, but if you've got any suggestions on stuff, they rock on the B-sides. Oh, right. Their own work. That sounds interesting. I'll have to look into that. So if you've got anything that you'd like sourced or tested, or an opinion on, or video made on, or anything, let me know. Can't guarantee anything, but if I can, I will try and do something. I will certainly try and answer questions. If you've got questions that you want answering, I will try and do the appropriate research to find out. And if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know, and then I'll do the research anyway, and then possibly update you. But it's one of those things where I'd like to know what people want to know so that I can tell them, or not. And I was playing with something today. Oh yeah, I was responding to Stephen, and saying about, I always wondered whether a stylus, the 78 stylus, would be any much better than the LP stylus playing 78s. Because I remember having the flip over BSR turntable when you had the flip over stylus. And as a kid I could never tell the difference. I've been looking for a subwoofer. But a passive one. Why would you want a passive subwoofer? There's an interesting question for you. Why would you want a passive subwoofer? That means you must have an amplifier for it elsewhere. Because I've got a subwoofer which I bought many years ago. That's trying to think. It's about 25 years ago, and even then it was unusual. Active speakers were unusual in those days, but subwoofers came very often. They were one of the first things to be active, because you need the power for them. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. What are you going to power it with? Right, okay. I've got. Right, I'll leave it at that then. Yeah, okay. I shall. Hang on. Because I have no subwoofer out, but loads of power. I only want it for movies. Yeah. You've got your new amplifier you told me about, but can I suggest to you that you're better off buying a subwoofer with an active subwoofer, for the simple reason that if you want to get decent woof out of your woofer, I think it's something like, hang on, the Yamaha can do over 200 watts RMS per channel. Yes, I know it can. But, well, yeah. My subwoofer is 75 watts RMS, my Yamaha subwoofer, which is what I've got. And it means that there is no stress on my main amp at all when the big bangs come, because the subwoofer's doing it all itself. That's the only thing that I would suggest. But yeah, no, if you can get one, you could of course just buy a subwoofer and unwire their amplifier. But the other thing is you could just buy literally a bass speaker, 15-inch bass speaker, or so a QTX do some passive speakers with some big. Because if you just bought a large passive speaker and took out the tweeters and things, then you would just have the woof. It's just a thought, but I would suggest going for one with a decent amount of power subwoofer. I was listening to Pierce Audio, and he really rates subwoofers. He reckons that you need a low pass filter as well. Exactly, you'd need a low pass filter as well. Well, that's easy enough. You can make one of those. But if you bought yourself now see, this is the thing. If you bought yourself a 200, if you bought yourself a proper subwoofer, you would find that it's got a low pass filter in it, and most of them actually feed from the. If you haven't got an output, although your Yamaha might well have an output because it's probably got an output for recording. If you haven't got an output, you just tap it onto the speaker leads as per normal, and it actually drives through the low pass filter, so it doesn't affect your high frequencies at all, and but it's still powered separately, so it doesn't affect. You don't get the lights dimming, so to speak. Anyway, it's just a thought. If in my investigations I find anything that looks suitable, I'll send you a message. But you could always make a low pass filter, but not if you're going to drive any current through it. This is the trouble. You see, once you start trying to do it that way, you then got to start putting high quality components in and stuff, and yeah, it all gets a bit confusing. Anyway, okay, I think I shall call it a wrap there. Thank you guys for coming, and I do appreciate the support. If you, like I say, if you've got any other questions or anything, do contact me one way or another. Either put a comment. I try and respond to the comments. I don't know if you noticed. I try and respond to comments on the videos quite quickly, and if it's something that my email address, for those who haven't got it, is on the channel details. If you send me a personal message on email, I'll always respond, and I will try and point you in the right direction. If I don't know the answer, I might know somebody who does, and we can always work from there. Yes, they do. They take speaker level inputs, and it means that you've only got one volume control. If you were an audiophile and you were taking the output from the like zone 1, zone 2 things, you would find that you've got to then alter every time you change your music, you'd have to alter the volume on the actual subwoofer. But my Yamaha, certainly, you just feed it straight in, and it just works, and you just wind it up and down. Try waiting a day to respond to comments. Why is that then? That sounds like an interesting thing. So other people are inclined to get involved. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, that's true. I shall put myself on delay then, and try and. But having said that, sometimes, like, have you noticed the one about the UFO? That one got quite interesting, and people, Mr. Gruff went off to try something, and it was all quite good on there. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I shall put myself on delay, and take that as being good advice. Okay then, right. I will wind it up now, and I will see hopefully you guys next week. All things being equal. Judging by the papers, we'll be lucky if we're all around next week, but that's another story. Anyway, okay, I shall try and say bye-bye, and thanks for coming, and keep safe, keep well, and see you next week. Bye.